Welcome back to Slop Live. I finally took my meds, so hopefully this episode isn't much longer than normal. Spider-Man 2 is the third, second and a half entry in Insomniac's Spider-Man franchise. Right off the bat, if you played the first two, you'll probably enjoy this one. They've really nailed down the traversal and fine-tuned it so it feels even better to both swing and glide through the city. One of the downsides, of course, is it's still in New York. The first game was in New York. Miles Morales was in New York, but it was snowing. And the third game is also in New York, but they added an extra island. So it does get a bit samey some of the time, as well as the combat. Again, I don't want to spoil much, but they add a few new abilities, which is basically like get out of jail free cards when you're getting overwhelmed in combat. I think combat almost seems even more dumbed down. Obviously, people like to make fun of Sony games. Well, there are no Sony games, but they like to make fun of it for being either a movie game or a game where the combat is just mashing square. And unfortunately, that's kind of how it is. It's basically mashing square and mashing the dodge button. You can pull off some cool things when there's not that many enemies, but most of the time, anytime you try and juggle someone in the air or do something cool, you're just going to be getting shot at, so you just have to dodge. And it ruins when you're trying to juggle someone in the air or slam them to the floor. This is basically the second game on the PS5 after Demon's Souls. Well, it'll be on PC in a year or two. But if you enjoy Spider-Man, if you enjoyed the previous games, you'll definitely like this one. The story has its ups and downs. The pacing is a bit weird, poorly paced towards the end of the game as well as the middle. Some of the spectacles and the big events and turning points in the game are still definitely cool. It's not as emotional. I mean, it is just Marvel slop. I didn't find it as emotionally impactful as the first game, where you had both Peter's mentor's descent into madness and him having to deal with the loss of his aunt. Spoiler alert. Again, there's definitely some cool parts in the game. Also, there's a lot of Easter eggs in here and a lot of Spider-Verse skins. Almost too many, or even almost too many movie skins. I know people love to be able to play as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man or Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and all those suits are in the game. There's so many of them that there's almost no room for some of the cooler suits from the comics. The only thing I will spoil is Miles does get a new suit for basically no reason, and it is fucking horrific looking. If you hadn't already seen it on Twitter, most of the internet would also agree. This definitely won't be the last game in the franchise. I think Insomniac has one more planned. They really need to change the location or put it in a different city. I don't know what city they could do. Like, I don't think anyone wants to play in Los Angeles. Wouldn't even need a villain. The city itself is revolting enough. After playing the first game, Miles Morales through twice, and now the third game, it's still a nice polished experience, very smooth. But by the time I finished up the game and I got 100% on all the side missions, I was really feeling that Spider-Man fatigue. It's an overall improved experience. The option to switch between Miles and Peter seamlessly when you're playing is pretty cool, and the fast travel is basically instant. To be honest though, I didn't even use this fast travel once because swinging through New York is just so satisfying. But yeah, solid game. I did run into a few more bugs than I did in the first game. Nothing game breaking, but a few things where pedestrians walked through walls. I phased through the wall and got stuck in a building at some point, but nothing too insane. Fortunately, the end game is pretty much dead. All there really is random events as you swing through the city. From memory, the Miles Morales game had a bit better attempt at this, where you could actually redo most missions. I'm sure they'll add all that in DLC, but if you weren't a fan of playing as Mary Jane Watson in the first game, which kind of broke the momentum, when you were forced to play as not only someone without powers, but you couldn't even attack anybody, then I kind of have bad news for you. There is definitely more of that, mostly used to move the story along and develop relationships, where you do play with very limited controls and you don't have access to Spidey's arsenal. But they did actually improve this by giving Mary Jane the ability to engage in combat instead of the mission ending the moment an enemy spotted you. Yeah, solid game. There's some cool story beats. I don't want to spoil anything. I preferred the first one overall just because it seemed a lot more tight of an experience. Felt like the story played through really well in that, and it was just, the first game is usually always the better one just because it's like a new experience, whilst this is a third experience playing as Spider-Man. But yeah, solid game. Not only do you swing through the city with the exaggerated swagger of a black teen, but you can also swing through the city with the exaggerated swagger of a mid-20s white guy dealing with the loss of his aunt. Yeah, I'm feeling a 75-80% on the slot meter. The game delivers, doesn't really drop the ball at any points, but it does get a little bit too repetitive. Thanks for slopping by.